Today, we're diving into a really startling report from LibTech India. It uncovers a huge mystery right at the heart of MGNREGA, one of the country's most vital rural employment programs. So let's just start with a number that's kind of hard to wrap your head around. 1.4 million. In late 2025, over just 6 weeks, that's how many workers, well, they just vanished from the program's records in Andhra Pradesh. And that really is the big question, isn't it? Where did they all go? Did they suddenly not need the work anymore, or did something else happen? Well, based on this LibTech India report, we're going to follow the clues and try to figure that out. Okay, first up, let's try to get a handle on the sheer scale of what the report itself calls a shocking disappearance. Because the numbers here, they're honestly staggering. So get this, between October 8th and November 19th, 2025, the number of registered workers, that's basically everyone who has a job card, it just plummeted by over 14 lakh. That's an 11.4% drop. And we're not just talking about people on a list. The number of active workers, the folks actually on the job, dropped by over 600,000. It's a massive, massive reduction in an incredibly short amount of time. And this wasn't spread out evenly either. Some districts got hit way harder than others. I mean, just look at Annamaya district. It lost over a quarter of its entire registered workforce from the program. Can you just imagine the impact that has on a local community? So you have to ask, what was going on during this exact 6-week period? Well, the report points to one single major government initiative, and it involves India's massive biometric ID system, Aadhaar. The government was running something called an e-KYC drive. It's basically a digital identity check using your Aadhaar card. And they made it mandatory for anyone who wanted to keep their MGNREGA job card active. Now, this campaign lines up perfectly with the time frame when those 1.4 million workers disappeared, which makes it our prime suspect. But this is where the story gets really, really strange. You would think that if an ID check caused so many people to get dropped, the program must have been a huge failure, right? Well, the data actually shows the complete opposite. On paper, this e-KYC drive looked like a massive success. A full 86% of active workers managed to complete their verification. So by all the official metrics, everything was going great. And that leads us to the central paradox of this whole thing. How can you possibly have a record high completion rate happening at the exact same time as a record high number of workers being dropped? The two things they don't seem to add up at all. To solve this puzzle, the LibTech India report really dug into what was happening on the ground. And what they found reveals a process that was a far cry from the smooth success the official numbers were showing. The report found that the frontline staff, the people doing the work, were under unbelievable pressure. They had a 1-month deadline, they were being monitored every single day, and they were trying to deal with all sorts of technical glitches. Just try to imagine trying to verify someone's fingerprints in a remote village with terrible internet, or dealing with an Aadhaar photo that's 10 years old and looks nothing like the person standing in front of you. It sounds like a total nightmare. So, under all that pressure, what happened to the workers who ran into those kinds of technical problems? Well, according to the report, they weren't given extra time, they weren't given support, they were simply deleted from the system, just to meet the targets. And this was all made worse by another huge problem. See, the Union Ministry actually has very clear rules, safeguards, to prevent people from being wrongfully deleted, but the report found absolutely no evidence that these rules were followed. There were no public lists of people being removed, no community reviews, and, this is the crucial part, no way for a worker to even know they were about to be dropped from the program and raise an objection. Now, you might be thinking this was just a one-time disaster, a bureaucratic mess-up, but the report makes the case that this is part of something bigger, something more systemic. It's part of a wider pattern where these big tech-led reforms end up excluding huge numbers of people. Let's look back a bit. In 2022 and 23, a different Aadhaar-linked payment system was rolled out. And what happened? Almost 7.8 million workers were deleted nationwide. Now, fast forward to 2025, and this e-KYC drive causes another massive reduction. The report connects these dots, suggesting this isn't an accident, it's a recurring problem. So what's the conclusion? The report says the problem isn't necessarily the technology itself. Instead, it points to what it calls a structural mismatch between technology-led compliance drives and ground realities in rural India.
Okay, so given all of these pretty damning findings, where do we go from here? The report doesn't just point out what went wrong, it also proposes some really clear, actionable solutions.
LibTech India is urging the state government to do three key things. First, ask the central government to withdraw these mandatory tech requirements that are causing so many problems. Second, they need to run a campaign to find and reinstate all the workers who were wrongfully deleted. And third, and this is so important, they need to start listening again, to revive consultations with workers and civil society to make sure technology is actually serving them and not the other way around. And all of this leaves us with a much, much bigger question, right? The story of Andhra Pradesh's missing workers isn't just about one program or one piece of technology. It's a really powerful case study that forces all of us to ask, in our rush to build these super efficient, data-driven systems, how do we make absolutely sure we don't leave millions of real people behind? Thanks for tuning into this explainer.